Good morning, Vietnam. Welcome to my second podcast, the second one of a trilogy on moving to Vietnam and living permanently, plus a lot of tips on why and how you can have a good time here, even if you don't live here permanently. Again, you can come for a week, a month, 3 months. If you're planning to live here, retire here, then I highly recommend 2 to 3 months stay at a minimum. I'd like to clear up a few things from my first podcast. Number one, I did use I would say almost a slur on what I thought was the attractiveness of some of the masseuses. It was very inconceived of me using that word. I don't think anybody is really ugly. I think that some people are just less attractive than others. And I regret using that word. Number two, I implied that if you own a car here as a foreigner, you get a N number plate. That is only for motorbikes. If you buy a vehicle, an auto, then you just get a normal number plate. And nobody knows who's driving it until the police pull you over and check your documents. Also, Vietnam is a socialist capitalist country. It's communist in its ideals and politics, but it is a very capitalist economy here. You have to be very careful here, opening a business and running a business. The people here have not been open to capitalism for a long time. In fact, only 28 years, since 1995, when the embargo on Vietnam was lifted by the US. And then it rapidly became a Western country. And I find that if you're going to do business or bigger business, then you have to have in your mind more safeguards, as many people here look at you as a Westerner as somehow you are easy pickings, and you are open target to trying to deceive you and cheat you in some way. But these all can be avoided, and I'll talk about that later in the next video as well. Medically, I do not have any life insurance, medical insurance. I did not have for the last 20 years in the US, even though in the US it is very expensive, expensive to see a doctor and go to hospital. My friend had an ankle injury that he got in Jamaica in the early 1990, and he spent a month in hospital in the US. When he came back, almost died from an infection. That stay cost him $30,000. I decided not to get insurance in the US because I knew I was very healthy. I ate extremely well, I exercised regularly, and I didn't think I was going to die suddenly unless I got in an accident in an automobile. Now, I had good insurance on my automobile and third party, so I wasn't concerned with that. Here, as I mentioned, the medical facilities and staff are excellent, and I see a lot of advertisements for expats to get medical insurance. I personally don't think you need it, but if you're concerned about the quality here, of course, you can always go back to your home country and get medical service. One of my friends did that even from Los Angeles. She was Australian, but she thought the medical services treatment in Australia was better than in the US. So she went back to Australia and got treatment there, and then later returned to Los Angeles. Now, motorbike tickets, or tickets in general for for road traffic infringements, the police have to do this because their salaries are so low. In fact, to become a policeman, you have to give them money. It's quite a lot of money, because they know they'll get it back eventually because of the traffic stops they do. And the money, they're supposed to write parking tickets, speeding tickets, or other infringements. They get their money back eventually after, I would imagine, a few years. Not too many. And remember that getting money from that type of action is totally illegal here. Whereas in the US, it's completely legal. You get a speeding ticket in the US, almost anywhere, and it's like $400. Here, you pay $20, $30, $40 occasionally. And so that's the reason, one of the reasons why there's corruption here. But if you are caught doing something like that on any level, even taking money from a traffic stop, they will fire you. Many people here have been put in jail from very large companies. I read a Vietnamese news online service every day, and there are many high-ranking officials, government officials, that have been locked up for many years for corruption. Just recently, there was a big case about during COVID, that they were trying to make money illegally from the COVID vaccines. Also, there's been 3 major bank scandals. One last year, I saw there was one in 2018 and one in 2016, where bank officials skimmed off millions and millions of dollars, and they all ended up in jail for very long periods of time. You may recall in the US, in all the financial crises, only a handful of people have ever gone to jail. In the last one, I believe there was only one low-level investment banker that went to jail. Here, if you get caught and they catch them regularly, you go to jail. That's it. There's no questions asked. Doesn't matter who you know. It's when you get too greedy, you end up in jail. In Vietnam, especially. There are, as I was saying, if you get caught, the government really has no sympathy for you. The last bank executive that's in jail right now waiting trial, she got so greedy, she even already had around $2 billion overseas that she'd already skimmed off a bank. And she still returned to Vietnam thinking that she had gotten away with it. Well, the last time she came back, they nabbed her, and now she's awaiting trial. She'll be in jail a long time. So, corruption, where is it better, the West or here? That all being said, let's get on to the bad things in Vietnam. The first thing I'm going to talk about is that English is taught very badly here. They teach the basics, grammar, vocabulary, and I see the kids learning that extremely well. But learning how to speak properly so you can understand what somebody's saying in English. Most Vietnamese English teachers have been taught here the same way, so their English is not very good. They're teaching all the students the same way, and so 90%, I would say, of the people I meet here to speak English are very hard to understand. I mentioned in the first video that I have trouble understanding my girlfriend many, many times. And half of the time, we just have to go to a translation app on our on our cell phones to work out what she's saying to me. And vice versa, of course. Her vocabulary is limited, so we use it sometimes. But the government now is putting up a lot of restrictions on qualifications to teach English, which seems absolutely ridiculous, and it's going to turn off, I think, a lot of people who potentially even want to come here for 6 months or a year and just work. And the easiest job for them to get is English. And now they're going to make it more difficult. Whereas they need more and more Vietnamese to learn the international language, which is English. Now, I've met a few people, women, who are learning Chinese. And even years ago, I recommended to them that they should really learn English because it is the international language. It has been for, I don't know, about, what is it now, 60 years? So that's the first thing. The second thing with the language aspect is in the big cities, everything is, I'll correct that. That there's a lot of restaurants have the menu written in English. It's only when you get out of the big cities that English is not on the menu and very, very difficult to communicate with the staff on what's on the menu. Even in Saigon, there's, I'm going to guess and say 10% of the menu of the restaurants have menus in English as well. Of course, where I live, there's a huge expat population. Another area called District 7, and also in the CBD, there are many restaurants with both Vietnamese and English. The next item is lawyers. They are becoming expensive here. I don't think you can get a lawyer here anymore for under $100 US an hour. For many Vietnamese, this is extravagant to say the least. When you're only earning $350 US a month, $100 an hour is stupidity. And I don't know if other professionals here are charging this sort of money, but it's the only one I've heard of, that to hire a lawyer here is really, really expensive. And resolution of problems here, I'm just going to file a lawsuit next week or a week after, and For foreigners, it's extremely difficult. And for Vietnamese, it is extremely difficult. They make it difficult. They don't want you to go to court for anything. They want you to resolve it well before you're thinking about going to court. And in fact, talking to many Vietnamese, they don't think like Westerners about if you can't resolve it, then we'll go to court. They don't seem to think that way. They try to resolve it, and because of the low salaries, it can be resolved by paying a small amount of money. If you're a foreigner and get into trouble, for example, an accident, the police, they want to resolve it right away. They don't want you to take it further than the accident scene. The police don't even want to lay blame on anybody. If you're a foreigner and you're in an accident, you are going to get the blame. Even if you're 100% correct, you will get some of the blame, and the police will try and force you to pay some of the damages. That's why if you're a foreigner here, do not get into an accident. You have to pay a lot of attention. Otherwise, you're going to have to pay some money to get at to let the thing go, to resolve it. So this is why if you're going to do any business here, make sure all your paperwork is 100% correct, in order, no mistakes on the documents. That being said, there's thousands of businesses in Vietnam here, from very small operations to, as I've said, massive corporations. Apple, for example, is putting together phones here. Nike, Samsung, there are huge factories here making furniture, and most of these items get exported. But for the smaller guys, even someone like me, you have to try to not get into a lawsuit or into a big argument with the police. I've been lucky. I have been ripped off a few times, and I have to file this lawsuit because the amount of money involved is too large to let it go. So lawyers and courts, a no-no for foreigners if you can help it. Now the third item connects the first two as well, and that is expediters and an extension of that, translators. And a lot of the work you're going to do here, if you get into a business and so forth, you're going to need a translator. Because, and I've been to some government offices, and half of them will help you. And I've had very good success in my last major problem, which had to do with the transfer of my truck from one company to another. I did not use a translator because some of my experience is that some translators don't translate only. They try to give their opinion, and then they will try to translate the Vietnamese in English that you understand, rather than just simply translating exactly what the person's saying. Vietnamese, again, the language, which also is my next point, is the language, has quite a bit of interpretation. If you use an app, a translation app, many times, at least 30% higher, it cannot translate to Vietnamese. No matter how carefully I write English sometimes, it translates into Vietnamese, and the Vietnamese person occasionally doesn't understand the translation. But the Vietnamese, to translate from Vietnamese to English, I would say at least 30%, 40%, it doesn't translate. The translation into English means nothing. So you need a translator. So if you're going to need one and meet one, you better have a very good conversation with them to make sure that their English is good enough, number one. Number two, you have to make it clear to them also that you don't want an interpretation of what the person is saying. You only want a pure translation. Now with that is expediters. Again, if you're going to use an expediter for anything here, you're going to have the same problem. You have to find an expediter that is not going to do interpretation, they're going to do translation. I have been lucky. The main two expediters I have used for two different things, having to do with visa and or company issues, have been very, very good, and it's worked out very well. But I can imagine you will have the same problem I have had occasionally with taking especially friends to help me with as a translator to government offices. So I trust in myself enough and the people, the Vietnamese, especially government officials, that they will help me. They all don't. I went to a police station a few days ago to help me with my auto problem because I got a speeding ticket 9 months ago, 400 kilometers from here. And when I went to re-register my truck, I couldn't do it because I have a speeding ticket. Resolving this is an enormous headache because normally you don't, if you get caught speeding, it's immediate. The police are right there. So this is the first I've heard of it. So I called a friend up who's in the auto business, who's worked on my truck. He's calling a friend who had the same problem. But it's only been one day and he hasn't called me back. Plus we're right in the middle of Tet holidays. So I won't call him till Monday to see how it all went. If not, I'm going to have to get my girlfriend to call the police station in this other city, province, and see how to resolve this. The local police, the city I live in, the main police station, she wouldn't even help me at first, and I actually got a little bit angry at her. She finally consented to help me, but in the end, all she did was give me a phone number of the police station I had to call in this other province. She could have called them herself, but this happens here in Vietnam. And I know it happens all over the world, but it's sometimes you'll get into situations like that where you want to absolutely lose it, but you have to accept the psychology of the people. And this is going to come up a number of times in this video and in the next video, how Vietnamese think. So the language is very tonal, and different areas of the country, different provinces, even just simply from Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh. People don't understand each other. Because it's a tonal language, and because a lot of the people you are going to work with, or become in contact with rather, like taxi drivers, they come to Saigon to work from a faraway place, and their Vietnamese is not the same. I've seen Vietnamese talk to Vietnamese and have no idea what they're talking about. So it is a really extremely difficult language. I've tried to learn it a couple of times. I gave up. There's a young guy I mentioned in my first video. He said he has the same experience. He's tried to learn it and he just gave up. I've met a number of foreigners who speak Vietnamese very well. The guy who manufactures old Vespa parts and refurbishes old Vespas, his Vietnamese seems to be very good. He's been here, I think, 15 years. Okay, that now also covers the language aspect, which is my next item I have on my list that I'm glancing at. It's not only education why you're not going to communicate. The psychology of the people here is very, very complicated. The country's been at war was at war for 50, I'm not sure, 50, 80, 100 years with the French. And then in 61, I believe, John Kennedy sent army advisors here to help the South, because at that time they were paranoid about the domino effect of communism, that the North, they didn't want the South to become a communist part of North Vietnam, which was already communist. And because above Vietnam is China, they were concerned that if South Vietnam fell to the communists, then it might go south and it might overrun Singapore, then Malaysia, even north to Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, whatever. So, and then the war here slowly escalated until 1975. So the Vietnamese people have been under constant fear and bombardment for around 100 years. And their psychology is not to trust anybody. Now, I'm not going to get any further into it right now. I want to use that in my next video and also as part of my conclusion on how and the difficulty of Vietnamese and the Vietnamese economy and the people to move forward because of their psychology. I will get also a little bit into food safety and restaurants. Again, the restaurants, I went on the internet when I was in, when I was in Dalat, which is a central highlands city, and I looked up the internet to go to a restaurant with my second cousin who was visiting in April last year, and it had really good reviews. And we went there and they had some music playing, which I found extremely annoying because I just want to eat in a restaurant. I didn't know they were going to have music and within the restaurant. But the food was very ordinary, average. I've been to a number of restaurants in my early years here where I was quite disappointed with the food. Now, as I said in my first podcast, you really want to go to restaurants people have talked about. I know the internet's not perfect, but it's still your best way to see if the restaurants are, how highly recommended they are. I have been in some very good restaurants here, but the best ones are expensive, relatively. Occasionally, I've eaten at cheaper restaurants and the food is quite good. There are many, many vegetarian restaurants here, but again, hard to find. And most restaurants here are meat-based. And I've even tried some of the meat very rarely, like goat, because I come from a family of goat herders in the mountains of northern Greece. And the goat was absolutely terrible. It was the worst cut pieces from the goat and the cheapest pieces. It was terrible. With that, it's the quality of the food that really, really worries me as well. I mentioned in the first podcast also. The local markets, every area has a local market, a daily local market, fresh food, and they sell meat openly, chickens openly, live chickens as well as dead chickens, cleaned and so forth, ready to eat. I think you have to remember, and you have to be so careful of where you buy fresh food outside of the supermarkets. Most of the expensive food in the supermarkets, I'll call that expensive food, nearly all comes from Dalat, which is only about 350 kilometers north of Saigon, and most of the fresh produce is grown there. And it's an interesting city to visit. I've been there a few times. I find it a little boring, but the weather's very different because it's, I can't remember, 2,000, 3,000 meters, I think only 2,000 meters above sea level. But it's very cool, it's pretty. There are some things to do there, but mainly having to do with water. And I don't like getting wet that much. So there's not much for me to do up there. The food again, if you're going to eat on the street, it's a high risk. You have to remember, in any country you visit, the immunity of the local people is very different to yours because they've been eating these foods and these bugs in the foods or wherever, for hundreds of years. The problem today in Vietnam, which is one of my later topics here, is, in fact, it's my next topic, is pollution. One of the biggest problems in Vietnam is pollution. Pollution invades this country. As it's a growing country, economically, especially in manufacturing, more and more people are becoming highly, highly qualified professionals. A lot of them study overseas and they're coming back, and there's a lot of R&D now in Vietnam. But it's not going to grow exponentially because 70 or 80%, yes, that's about right. 70% of the people still work on the land. Middle class, I would say, is between 10 and 15% at the moment. And of course, you have the super rich who drive around in brand new Rolls Royces. Or the company VinFast, the new electric automotive company here in Vietnam, is was started by the richest guy in Vietnam, his company. I'm sure he has huge investors from around the world. And he's the super rich. I've met one guy who's a billionaire. My first job here, the project I was project director for, he was the chairman of that company. And they actually build and assemble trucks as their main business. Now they're assembling Peugeots, automobiles. So he's very rich. So pollution, now before I start, there are many laws on the books here against pollution. Motorbikes drive around making a lot of noise, and the occasional one, no, not occasional, it's quite a few that are producing a lot of pollution. But the police don't enforce the law. And I think a lot of the times, especially in the countryside, many of the families that go to the police station to complain about pollution, especially chemical pollution from factories, where the water gets polluted from the runoff from the factory effluents, and making people sick, and they go to the police station, the police say, oh, they obey the law. I think my guess is that that's only true 50% of the time, because of corruption here, and also the psychology again of the people. They don't want a headache. They don't want to deal with it. So the police say, yeah, but they're obeying the law. Well, these people are farmers. They have no idea what the actual law or quality control of the effluent is and how it's supposed to be disposed, because they can't find out. So you have to be, if you're outside of the city, you have to be really, really, major cities, you have to be really, really careful about water. And it's one of the things I really worry about if I buy any food not in the supermarkets, is the quality of the water and how the food is grown. Second thing is trash. Trash collection here is abominable. It is collected. In a high-rise building like this one, you have excellent trash collection. But in the smaller, much smaller buildings and single-family dwellings, the villas and the shops and so forth, the small shops, everything's in plastic bags, and it's just put on the side of the street on the day that the garbage collectors come and pick up all the trash. I'll give you an example of trash that did not work out here. Milk is becoming more and more a favoured drink for children. And this company told the government that there are about 200 milliliter containers. Their outside is paper, the interior is, it looks like aluminum lined. I mean, a very negative trash pollutant impact, whether it's a landfill or just thrown around on the streets. And the companies, especially one company, the biggest one, said that they would recycle 80-90% of this. And I read an article 6 months ago that said that is a complete lie. And in fact, only about 10% end up being recycled. and the other 90% end up in landfills. The laws exist, but they're not enforced. This is one of the biggest things with trash. The other thing is plastic bags, single-use plastic bags. I don't know what Vietnamese did before the plastic bags came into this country. When I was growing up in Australia, plastic didn't exist. The only thing I can think of where there was plastic was the refrigerator. I can't remember the exterior was plastic, but definitely the interior was plastic. Beyond that, other than some radio, TV components and so forth, there was no other plastic. We did not grow up with plastic. All the bags that we used to buy food were in paper. And in fact, because we were hillbillies, my father didn't believe in buying 1 or 2 pounds of food, 1 kilogram, whatever. He would buy a whole wood box of food. And we would have to cart these home, even when I was very young, from the market. So these single-use plastic bags in countries like Vietnam are everywhere. You can drive from here all the way to Hanoi, and they're all on the side of the road. Millions and millions and millions of plastic bags. I mean, I think it's really, really disgusting. Again, that's the psychology of the Vietnamese people. Out of mind, out of sight. Or is it out of sight, out of mind? Once it's left their hands, they're not responsible for it anymore. And that's the way they think about many, many things here. The other thing that you see on the side of the road a lot is single-use plastic containers for iced tea, iced coffee, and juices. 3 parts. You've got the container, which is 600 milliliters. You have the cap, and then you have the straw. Many restaurants and coffee shops do not use plastic anymore, but we're only talking, my guess is 10%. Many Vietnamese buy iced coffee on the way to work, and it's all in these single-use plastic containers. And we're talking millions a day. And the government has not put out any regulation on plastic use yet in Vietnam. The other thing is dust. After 10 years of living here, the dust is ubiquitous, absolutely. We clean our apartment twice a week because of the dust. I don't use air conditioning in the house, the apartment. I think the temperatures here, as I mentioned, are not high enough to warrant air conditioning. I turn them on just to keep everything lubricated. And my girlfriend has complained occasionally, but she knows I don't like it because I don't need it, and of the environmental impact. So the dust here, the reason is because we have all the windows open and the sliding door to the balcony open, fully open all day. Just close it, almost fully closed at night. The way we keep cool, most people keep cool in Vietnam, is fans, electric fans. Many people have them in the center of rooms, ceiling fans. My apartment doesn't have it. I don't like them in the center of the room. It's too unidirectional. But we use fans to sleep with, floor fans. The air conditioning fans we use occasionally, but mainly I have 2 floor fans that we use. There's normally one on at least all the time, and we sleep with one on at night. I don't need it, but my girlfriend needs it. So anyway, there's dust everywhere, and that's mainly caused by construction. There is continuous construction all over the cities, all the cities, and so they create a lot of dust, and it just gets blown around everywhere. And because it gets blown around everywhere, and also there's a lot of trucks, small, medium trucks can use the roads all day here in Saigon. The larger trucks, the semi-trailers, can only come into the city after 10 p.m. to make deliveries, because the roads are too small and there's too much traffic. That's one of the really, really good things about traffic here. So chemical companies produce a lot of chemical waste, and a few of them have been caught doing that on some mid-coastal city. A large, I think it was a Japanese company, it could have been South Korean, was spilling its waste that ended up going into the ocean, and they got caught and had to pay a massive fine. But like anywhere in the world, I don't think it's anywhere near enough. It's like when Fox paid that 900 billion fine for lying on TV. I mean, shit. They make that, I don't know, 6 months, maximum 1 year, $1 billion profit. It's a joke. They should be paying 5 to 10 times what the fines are everywhere in the world for pollution like that. And yet, Miss Anna Kasparian from TYT, which I think is probably the best vlog on the internet, she said the other day that we have to go towards more of nuclear energy because it's clean. Well, she's absolutely right. It is clean energy. But to get there, number one, it's like building the subway here. How much concrete they've used to build the subway system here. Most of it's overground, but I'll get to that later. But to build a nuclear plant, it takes years of planning and then years of construction. So they say a plant is, when they start it, $5 billion. Every plant that was built ends up costing at least 5 times more. I checked on the internet the other day. And the amount of pollution is created to build them is enormous. And of course, she forgets that how do you dispose of the nuclear waste? It just makes no sense to me. Nuclear energy is dead on arrival. So, there's also a custom with the religion here, the Buddhist religion, that burning things in some way is good for the gods, is good for you, is evil spirits away, brings you good luck, and da-da-da. So, they're always burning trash. I mean, I can understand burning some leaves and so forth, but there's so much plastic around, so they collect all, sweep up the street and put it in a pile and then burn it. So they're always burning these plastic containers, plastic bags, whatever, with the leaves and twigs, whatever, and creates all this pollution. So there's all this burning trash all the time, everywhere. Not all the time, but a lot. Noise pollution. My God. Right now there is someone is playing music outside. So I went around and closed all the windows and doors. I don't know if you can hear it in the background. They're playing music super loud. I don't know how Vietnamese think. They have these karaoke bars, number one, which, okay. But the law here was going to be changed before COVID, where you couldn't do karaoke in the open air anymore. And then COVID came and the government backed down. So they're still allowing it. So one of the new restaurants where I live, if a customer requests it, he can do karaoke in an open air restaurant less than 100 meters from me. It is, for the West, it is stupidity. Vietnamese seem to handle this noise and can sleep through this noise, where every Westerner would have gone bananas by now. And I tend to go bananas with noise as well. And of course, there's a lot of street dogs here. There's more street dogs than there should be because people used to eat dog here. And not that it's overrun by street dogs, but there's always street dogs. Where I live, there's some, so they start barking non-stop. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And so the people seem to now also want dogs in their lives. So in front of me there's a lot of villas. Many of them have dogs for security. The dogs just start barking, or they're all barking in a chorus. And it goes on and on and on. And no one tells the dog to shut up. Where I drop off my occasional dry cleaning, they have a small older dog. Every time I go there, it starts to bark and it just won't shut up. The owner says, be quiet. The dog keeps barking. I mean, it's ridiculous. They put up with this goddamn noise. As a Westerner, they sleep through this stuff. Now, I don't know how they do it. I don't know what is it, how they are able to sleep through this noise. I don't get it. It is so annoying. And of course, children. Occasionally, the times I do eat out, and more rare, but of course there's families here with young kids, and they let their kids run around the restaurant yelling at each other. I won't say screaming, but in front of me is a lot of small apartments. I don't know how they're legal, but they were built. I've seen them all around Vietnam. These tiny studio apartments with families living in them. So their kids come out, especially late in the evening, early night, and play and so forth, and they scream their heads off. So as a Westerner, and as a Westerner who noise bothers him, it's a real pain for me. And then finally on the bad things, some of the good things have flown into the bad things, and some of the bad things will flow into the really ugly things in my next podcast. It is driving in Vietnam. Mr. Jung from Jung Business Services. I forgot the name of his podcast. He said he never had an accident in the US. He grew up in the US. In his automobile, I believe. And he's had 5 here in less than 10 years. Well, I haven't had an automobile accident. I took my eyes off the road briefly and got scraped with the handlebars of a motorbike. It wasn't very bad, but I still had to get it fixed. But it sounds like Mr. Jung had bigger accidents. My guess is that he's an okay driver. But I love driving. So I taught myself how to drive an automobile. I used to steal my sister's car and teach myself how to drive. And I drove like a maniac. I'm lucky to be alive. But I love driving, and I really haven't been in any accidents. But I've been hit on a motorbike. I've been hit 3 times by an auto. The government keeps reducing the taxes to buy autos here. The people don't know how to drive properly, really. Of course, anyone can drive from A to B. But it's not a car culture at all. It's a motorbike culture. So these people, as they make money, buy cars. And they have very low respect for motorbike riders. They think they own the road because they're safe in their 2-ton metal box. So these 3 people have hit me, one intentionally. I mean, I was just going in front of him, the traffic was stopped, and he thought he'd be a complete asshole and just hit me, touched me, and I fell over. Another time the guy was paying no attention, just ran into me, again at a very low speed, I just fell over. And I tried to deal with that accident with the police. What a waste of time that was. After giving them all the information, all the time I spent with my friend doing a police report, I went back there, or they called my friend up and said, well, the automobile was a car rental. That's all we know. Well, somebody had to sign for it. But as I said, the police do not want to deal with problems, with blame, unless someone gets badly hurt or someone thinks they're going to get badly hurt. The same in the West. They won't come. They don't care. And the third time, this guy pulls out of the high-rise building across the road from me. And I was just got out of my building and just going past. No attention. I just saw him out of the corner of my eye and pulled the bike away from him. So he didn't hit me, but it was like inches, 1 inch, 2 inches before he was going to hit me. I stopped my bike like the other 2 times and screamed at the guy. Oh, sorry. This is the excuses, whether they're trying to kill you on a motorbike or auto. Oh, sorry. It's like, damn, I mean, you're going to be maimed for life if you get hit by a car on a motorbike. And you see mainly men, occasional women, driving 3-wheeled motorbikes because their legs have been shot from accidents. Now, of course, they can just be motorbike accidents, and I've seen quite a few of those, motorbikes hitting motorbikes. But going back to autos, these guys now think they own the road. It is just staggering to me how they have no respect for your life. Now that also goes to motorbikes. These guys, and occasionally women, like in the West, suddenly think that they own the road. But here, they really do think they own the road. They drive like they own the road. They don't care about almost any road laws. They drive like they want. They cut you off all the time to save a fraction of a second. They will cause an accident. Now, a lot of people do die on the roads here. Probably the average is the same as any country in the world. But remember, this is a motorbike culture. If you have an accident here, you're going to get hurt. And these guys especially, they drive down the wrong side of the road at speed. They cut you off all the time. They don't indicate. They pull in front of you. How many times, and this is every day, anytime you go out, at least one time, you have to avoid an accident. Vietnamese people are aware of this and they drive accordingly. I have been so close to chasing someone because they nearly totally almost crashed into me on motorbikes. So I have to control myself because they have zero respect for life in Vietnam. I've seen it too much not to say that. I'll talk again more about that psychology later. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks again for listening. I will post the third one, the really, really ugly things, even though some of the things I've said today will flow onto the ugly things tomorrow or the next day. Thanks so much. I look forward to your comments and keep well until the next one. Bye.